So a customer might rate Coke is better than Pepsi, or Pepsi is better than Coke. So the rank order scale. Now this is also a very important scaling technique that we are using. The same product might be rated differently by different people. The Leica Scale, this is one of the most interesting scale. The consumers will be able to go forward as one-shot delivery. Good morning and welcome to the session 2 in Unit 3 in Business Research Methods, where we are going to talk about the scaling techniques. The scaling techniques are very important in research analysis, and they have a lot of significance when it comes to the business research. So moving further, let's try to understand the various types of scaling techniques that are used. The various types of scaling technique in research includes the comparative scales and the non-comparative scales. In the comparative scaling, the respondent is asked to compare one object with the another. This is the most common form of research which I would like to call. Why? Because in the comparative scaling, you will try to compare an object A versus another object. So that's why comparative scaling is very important, is very mandatory in terms of understanding. So comparative scaling plays a very important role in terms of the business analysis. Now, how is the paired comparison scale starting? This is the first kind. This is a comparative scaling technique in which the respondent is presented with two objects at a time and asked to select one of the object. You need to rate in between. Now, typically, if I would like to give you an example here, if I give you an option to choose between Coke and Pepsi, two objects, the customer has to rate one object better than the other. Why? Because he might have its own priorities or reason. So a customer might rate Coke is better than Pepsi, or Pepsi is better than Coke. So that is where we are trying to bring in the paired comparison. Now what I say here is that the paired comparison method is basically ordinal in nature. So it's again about a qualitative factor used on certain criteria, and the paired comparison is useful when the number of brands are limited. So here, when we look into this form of comparison, the paired comparison method is very simple. Why? Because in this the brands are limited. I'm going to talk only between Coke and Pepsi. I'm not going to use multiple brands for branding or for utilizing here. So in that sense, paired comparison is always a very important factor, a very important tool altogether, and that provides a lot of option in terms of making the choice well between the given factor. Now, one of the disadvantages of this particular method is the scale is that the violation of assumption of transitivity might occur. So now what happens is that there's a violation of assumption. There might be a problem that I might have assumed certain things. Based on that assumption factor, there might be violation. The consumer might just go ahead of that, and there might be a transitivity, which means, you know, the options, the orders might change accordingly. Followed by the rank order scale. Now this is also a very important scaling technique that we are using. This is another type of comparative scaling technique in which the respondents are presented with several items simultaneously and asked to rank them in the order of priority. So you're going to rank them in the order of priority. Like for example, you might be given brand A, brand B, C and D. So you will be asked to rank them accordingly. So one might rank this as the first one, this might be the second one, this might be the third one, and this might be the fourth one. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to give a rank here. I'm trying to give a fractionality saying that these are the ranks, these are the levels in which I like the particular product altogether. This is again an ordinal scale. When I use the word ordinal, they are qualitative natured scaling methods. So they are basically ordinal in nature, and the favored and the unfavored objects, but does not reveal the distance between. When I say the distance, I am not able to bring in the actual comparison between the two products. Why? Because it's only going to show a priority in terms of favoritism versus the non-favoritism altogether. So whenever you see a rank order coming into picture, a rank order is typically a kind of method that will be able to help you, that will be able to explain you about the priorities that are being given to one product versus the another product. And this is very, very normal in the case of FMCG products. So when you are asked to rate between 4 different kinds of soap, or 4 different kinds of shampoo, or 4 different kinds of chocolate, or 4 different kinds of detergents, now you would be able to see that you do a ranking, you try to select which one you would like to give the first preference compared to the second, third and the fourth. So that's exactly where the rank order scaling comes into picture, and it is a very, very powerful tool in terms of comparing in statistical research. Next, the constant sum scale. Now the constant sum scale is a very important tool. In this scale, the respondents are asked to allocate constant sum units such as points, rupees, chips among the assignment is that's a set of similar objects respect to some criterion altogether. So what I'm going to do is that allocate similar value, constant sum value with respect to some factors that are being given. So it can be either in the form of coins or it can be in the form of some values altogether. So what will happen is that the constant value, the end value should equal to 100. Now for example, it might be 25 into 4, 25, 35, then again 20, again 40, whatever. Whenever we add it up all together, the final value should be equal to 100. So I'm allocating some values here. I'm trying to put a constant value sum in some format so that I get a final end value as constant. So that is very, very important, but we are going to use a certain set, a certain method, a criteria altogether to achieve this constant sum rating scale, followed by the Q sort or the quick sort altogether. Now the Q sort is something, a comparative scale that uses a rank order procedure to sort objects based with similarity with respect to the certain criterion. Now let's take the criteria of smartphone itself. Now on smartphone, there are difficult types of smartphone that comes into picture. Certain smartphones might have fingerprint touch ID, certain smartphones will have one touch ID. There are so many other factors that comes into a smartphone. Now when you're going to categorize the smartphone based on features, based on certain pricing category, based on certain priorities, now you're going to come into a quick sort scale altogether where you are going to rank order, use that procedure to sort objects based on similarity. So the same variety, same range of smartphones with certain criteria under which you have taken, even the price range would be the same, the features would be as close as possible. So all those things will come into picture. The next one is the important characteristic of this methodology is that more important to make comparisons among different respondents or the factors between the different respondents here altogether. Why? Because the same product might be rated differently by different people. So that's why different response of the respondent than the responses between different ones. That's the comparison factor that we are going to compare here, that we are going to see here. So for the same characteristic, this methodology is something like using the same thing repeatedly again with a different set of customers. You will be able to see that there is some comparison, there are some differences that we are going to notice, because every customer will not value the product in the same manner, in the similar understanding altogether. He will try to prioritize. He will try to see that there is some difference, there is some meaning, there is some value altogether. So based on that criterion only, the quick sort scaling will happen. This is something where, I would like to mention a point here. This is more about a behavioral characteristic kind of thing. Why? Because when you use this kind of scaling in a behavioral character, in a behavioral rating scale pans altogether, this kind of quick sort scaling often comes into picture. This is quite interesting, and this involves a lot of key parameters in terms of understanding how the rating has been done. Now, The Likert scale, this is one of the most interesting scale that was ever developed in the field of research. Let me just give you a quick highlight. In business research, the Likert scale was developed by a great person named Renesas Likert, who's extremely popular in terms for measuring attitudes because the method is simple to administer. Now, Renesas Likert was the great person who went ahead and created a scaling method which is very, very easy for us to understand the behavioral attitude, the behavioral outcomes, the likings and the factors. This is more about the intangible factors that we are involving ourselves in terms of research. Now, a typical Likert scale would be applicable in the field of human resources when you are being asked to rate your job, rate your boss, rate your environment, or rate your, the nature and the challenges involved in your job. So all these kind of things will have a rating scale. They are not absolute value. Now what I mean by saying is that over a period of scale of say 5 or 10 kind of thing, when you say 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, it is not immediately a translation, but that levels up on the scale, saying that to this extent, to this value, I go ahead with that option. So that is why the Likert scale is supposed to be one of the best scales that has ever been administered in the field of business research. Followed by, with the Likert scale, the respondents indicate their own attitudes by checking how strongly they agree or disagree with carefully worded statements that range from very positive to very negative for any of the attitudinal objects altogether. So that word is very, very important. Why? Because when you understand the factor called as positivity to negativity, certain times we might agree with certain statements 100%. We believe that yes, it has to be there. It's a mandatory yes. Certain times it might be a mandatory no, and certain times it might be in between. That's exactly where a Likert scale comes into picture, which is able to measure the differences, measure the facts and figures carefully and tell you what exactly is the rating, what exactly is the feature, what exactly is the understanding altogether. So when we talk about this Likert scale, we also understand that over a period of time, over a sequence of activities, the ratings have been looked into. So that is how we will be able to get the values. Now the respondents generally choose from 5 alternatives, say strongly agree, agree, neither agree, disagree, strongly disagree, on all those factors. So I'm trying to give you options in terms of your mentality, in terms of your attitude, in terms of your belief factor. How much do you go with that statement? So that is why Likert scale has got a great presence, a great prominence in terms of the attitudinal research. Now, the semantic differential scale. Just look into the word semantic differential scale. This is a 7-point rating scale with endpoints associated with bipolar labels such as good and bad, complex and simple. So all those factors that have a semantic meaning. Now, semantic meaning is both the plus and the minus factor. The semantic differential scale is used for variety of purposes. It can be used to find out whether the respondents has a positive or negative attitude towards an object. So for example, any particular object, now let's say the usage of Wi-Fi. How many people believe that the usage of Wi-Fi is positive? How many people believe that the usage of Wi-Fi is negative? So you can do a semantic rating scale to find out whether people are agreeing to that particular term or people are going away from that particular term. So in that sense, this is very, very important. This is very, very interesting scale altogether. It has widely been used in comparing brands, products, company images, and also helps in developing advertising promotion strategies. Why? Because a semantic rating scale will give you a comparison between a product A versus product B. So if you're going to compare a detergent A versus detergent B, soap A versus soap B, now what is going to happen? There is going to be a direct comparison where you are going to see what is the object object, what is the respondent's direct feeling towards it. Certain people might directly reject a brand, certain people will blindly accept a brand. So you will be able to see the semantic comparison there itself. Followed by the itemized rating scales. The itemized rating scale is a scale having numbers, brief descriptions associated with each category. So there's a small description that is associated with the category there. The categories are ordered in terms of scale position, and the respondents are required to select one of the limited numbers of categories best to describe the product, the brand, company, or the product attribute being rated. So please understand, product attribute being rated altogether. So that is the factor, that is the condition that you need to understand here. The categories are ordered in terms of scale position, and respondents are required to select that number of categories. So you have to select the category, which is the category that you would like to choose. Now, for example, in mobile phone, do you want to go for a luxury having these kind of factors? So you're going to go into category price rating from 50,000 and above, having these particular set of features, having a memory of this size, a ROM of this size. So I'm going to categorize based on that attribute is going to be the rating scale that is going to come into picture. Now, the itemized rating scales are widely used in marketing research. So most of the marketers across the world will use this because this gives them a package understanding, how a package can be marketed, what kind of package we can fit in for every product, so that when you're going to market it, when you're going to take it forward, when you're going to put it across, the consumers will be able to go forward as one-shot delivery. So that's where the itemized rating scales are very, very important. With this, I come to the end of this session. I hope and believe that this session was of a great help and resource to you. In the upcoming sessions, we shall try to understand more about the rating techniques which are very helpful in the modern business world. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.